Hello everyone, Kilted Warrior here. I hope you're having a lovely day and I invite you to join me as we delve into Halo Infinite.
Chief, you still with me?
I'm here.
Okay, give me a second. I'm coming to get you. Welcome back, Chief. Okay, let's get out of here.
Halo Infinite is the sixth entry in the Master Chief saga and 343 Industries' third installment in the Reclaimer saga, after a 6-year hiatus since the Halo 5 Guardians game. As a result of this long wait, it is important to see how the series has changed even within the Reclaimer saga, but also how this new game, that is truly a generation apart from its predecessors, shapes up as a successor to those games, and also the original trilogy of games. Therefore, it carries the weight of several questions that I shall be delving into, ranging from its combat and gameplay to its story and characters, but also its presentation, as well as what it indicates for the future of this venerable series of games. Nevertheless, this video is also able to work as a standalone piece, and so I will limit any discussion of prior titles to the spoiler sections, or I will keep them to a minimum and only discuss them when necessary. To give some context about this game and my experience with the series, I had not played any Halo games before my first playthrough of this, as to see how new players might experience it. But then with my follow-up playthrough, I had played through the whole Master Chief collection, including ODST and Reach, but I have not played Halo 5 as it is not available on PC, though I did read into the plot of that game and made sure to watch a few playthroughs of it to familiarise myself with it and how it links to this game. Also note, I will not be covering the multiplayer in this video. Multiplayer doesn't interest me that much, and this video was built to discuss the single player experience. That said, I have split this video into several sections, so feel free to skip to what you are most interested in, as this is going to be a long one. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Oh, solid ground. As good as this feels. Please tell me we can go.
Oh, I don't need to. It's already on its way down.
Incoming.
But what if it's a friend?
It isn't.
Find him. Kill him.
Spartan, don't look now, but 3 clone deletes are behind you. Have fun dying. Made you look. Hey, while I got your attention, you need a sidekick or something? I'm available.
As far as gameplay and combat are concerned, Halo Infinite lives and dies by a good mixture of shooting, melee and mobility. And having played the rest of the series after playing Infinite, I feel like this is the crux of the series since its first installment. All weapons feel impactful with some great sound work, and as with the entire series, all enemies are carefully designed to have reactions to your various attacks, with flinching, staggering and otherwise being at the mercy of the forces Chief throws against them. Add to that plenty of locational based reactions to fire, such as grunts, methane tanks being punctured, brutes' chest plates and helmets flying off, exposing them to deadlier attacks, or jackals recoiling with their shields when hit with precise shots, or even the poor sods with jetpacks igniting. And with all that, you have a really fun shooting system. We also cannot forget vehicle sections, which are less dedicated sections in this game and more optional weapons of vehicular death for you to consider. Yet in retrospect, these are staples of the Halo combat system. What sets Infinite apart from its predecessors is how it handles movement. This is the most mobile Master Chief we have ever seen. And being able to dart across the battlefield and fall upon foes like an angel of death, his ability to climb, sprint, grapple hook his way to victory, for me is what makes all the traditional Halo elements gel so well together in this title. And it's clear that the developers built this game and its battlefields around the grapple hook.
Whatever it was is gone now. Be on your guard.
I'd like to dedicate a section discussion purely to the grapple hook, as I think it warrants it. Grapple hooks or gadgets of a similar function are not new to games nor first-person shooters. That is, Halo Infinite is not revolutionary in this regard by any means. But this is a great implementation of the system, and unlike many games, it does not seek to limit its usage, but rather builds its design around allowing its constant use. That is, it is a gap closer, charge attack,
In the central structure.
grabs weapons at range, grabs explosives, traversal tool, and by all means allows Chief to control any engagement and gives him many options. It allows Chief, even on harder difficulty, to take high-risk engagements up close and personal and live to tell the tale, as it prevents simply sticking to cover constantly out of fear of being stuck in the open. At all times, Chief has a means of relocating if required, and is able to close the gap with melee weapons instantly, such as with Jackal snipers, Brute snipers, or anyone else foolish enough to think that elevation makes them safe from Chief's wrath. The grapple gets a few upgrades as the game progresses via Spartan core points, which I will briefly discuss when I cover all the gadgets Chief gets. However, as far as gameplay goes, it's arguably the most important gadget to max out early, as it allows him a great deal of extra mobility and is just pure fun to use. If it wasn't obvious, yes, I think it is a great addition to Chief's arsenal, and it's a great part of any playstyle here.
She was carrying an enhanced shield module. Let's see what I can find out about her. Accessing. This is Spartan Bonita Stone, recon specialist. Her vitals have been offline for nearly a month. Cause of death was an energy blade, but different, stronger. A single strike. She never saw it coming.
The progression of Chief in this game is based around gadgets or modules he finds during the main campaign, and is able to improve them using Spartan cores which he finds throughout the world. Effectively, they are like skill or perk points from other games, and are used to enhance the capabilities of said modules, but also some substantial changes on how those modules actually work. Hence, Chief starts with the Grappler, which is a grapple hook, gains Shield Core, Threat Sensor, Drop Wall, and Thruster by the end of the game. Shield Core is literally just a buff to his total shielding. It's nothing special, but it allows your shields to take more hits, and therefore is essential in heroic difficulty, I found. Nothing special, but it is what it is. Threat Sensor is a weird one. It's helpful, but situational. You see, the thing is, Chief already has a motion tracker on his radar, as with previous games, and enemies have an amusing tendency to not keep their mouths shut, so you can always locate them just by listening. particularly grunts. That said, tracking elites is important because they can cloak when their shields go down, and their energy blades can outright kill Chief if he's not at max shields. So tracking him is important, and there are 2 bosses similar to that where this is also useful. Its upgrades are nothing special. They basically extend the range, cooldown changes, eventually it gets constant tracking rather than the pulse it starts with. But it's more or less uninspired, and I would say it was the last gadget to consider upgrading. At least it was the last one I bothered to upgrade. That said, it is cool that the elites recognise when you're tracking them and will taunt Chief as a result, which is a pretty cool touch. Drop wall is interesting because at first I wasn't a fan of it. I felt it went against the design philosophy for the combat in this game. That is, Chief is at his best when he's running and gunning, grappling and eviscerating flanked foes at close range. So the idea of something that forces you to kind of be stationary is against that in my mind. But when I started to do heroic difficulty, I found that certain tougher enemies with heavy weapons, such as brute chieftains, hunters, but especially the chieftains with the scrap cannon, I believe it's called, it allows Chief to stand and shoot against those enemies and kill them very quickly. As using assault tactics against them, it's very difficult to kill them quickly, and they can easily blow away Chief if he tries to stand up in those cases. That is, unless you have a giant hammer. Just saying, gravity hammer against chieftains, you get the idea. As far as its upgrade tree, it basically just improves the overall durability of the drop wall itself, though its final rank does add shock to any weapon shooting through the shield, which can be very helpful as it does stun enemies. Overall, the drop wall is helpful for certain circumstances, but I tended still not to use it too much because, again, it does limit your mobility if you want to get the most use out of it. The last module that Chief will unlock is the thruster module, which is basically a dash. In theory, I should like this. I find dodging in any game to be quite helpful and fun when you get timing right, but through my playthroughs I didn't even bother using this until I got the final upgrade, which is the invisibility. The thing is, if I want to avoid a melee attack or a missile, I either jump out of the way like a crazy person, as with most Halo games, or I just grapple away. Simple as that. Dash doesn't clear enough distance to be that useful. However, when you add in the temporary invisibility and dashing to cover, you suddenly can confuse enemies to do a short relocation movement and then re-enter the battle with a decisive few seconds where the enemy looks the other way thanks to the cloak, and you have an opening which allows you to finish them. If I had to name the best module that Chief gets, it's obviously Grapple. Grapple is definitely king, it's not even close. It's the default for a reason, and it's clearly the most interesting as far as upgrades go, allowing you to stun enemies, quicker usage, a stunning explosion at the end. It is the ultimate tool and should always be a default. The others are exceptions for particular circumstances, or when the grapple is on cooldown, which brings me to what I liked more about my secondary playthrough. Having gadgets on separate cooldowns was a great decision for this game. Unlike previous games where you got limited use items that were similar, that would replace each other when you picked them up, I think this is the right call. What this means is that the combat becomes even better when you mix and match the different modules in a single engagement. Hence, you shoot the threat sensor at range to show where all the hostiles are. You then use your grappler to position or to target high priority enemies for stun attack or a melee smash. Then you can use the thruster to break line of sight and cloak into cover, and then re-engage at a new angle. And then possibly, if it is required, you can use drop wall when dealing with high DPS enemies or those trying to flank you. And it allows for a sort of a fallback position if your shields do go down. Here is an example on heroic difficulty where I was using all the gadgets in a single engagement.
There's nothing around.
I found by mixing them together it makes it more dynamic and encourages you to use all the different weapons available in the game as well, as they can all benefit from the usage of different modules in the right circumstances.
You have one bullet against an entire army. What can you do on your own?
I told you. It's enough.
Oh, so I see. No. They're powering up a stasis beam. We can't escape.
You work on the batteries. I'll buy us some time.
As far as weapons, Halo Infinite uses several weapon archetypes, such as ballistic, plasma, shock, hard light, and power weapons. And with a 2-weapon carry limit, it encourages the player to mix up weapons and makes power weapons such as the anti-material rifle or melee weapons or even the skewer very powerful. But usually they don't have refill containers for ammunition, so should be used carefully, which makes these weapons both fun, useful, and also not too strong because of their limited use. I like the use of these archetypes as they tend to be their own style of weapons, with ballistics mostly being UNSC weapons which are more accurate, decent damage and have plenty of ammo, but require regular reloads, while plasma, largely banished or more accurately classic Covenant weapons, many of which don't have reload but have overheating as their mechanic, such as with the plasma rifle or pistol. Also, they are stronger per shot than ballistic weapons, I found, and if you don't control your fire, they will overheat, which leads to a style in which you switch from your plasma to another weapon during such moments. Yet the ballistic and plasma archetypes have the most access to ammo refills in the game, so it's encouraged to have at least one of these each. The hard light archetype, which are Forerunner weapons, have less ammo but are very powerful in their roles, but are also very specialised, and they tend to have more diverse alternative fire modes, such as with the Cinder Shot, which acts a bit like a grenade launcher, but also has an alternative fire mode which allows you to direct the shot even around cover. While the Sentinel Beam, which is found throughout most of the series, is a by the numbers beam weapon that's very common in certain areas, so there's no ammo issues, and like all hard light weapons, has a very cool disintegration death effect, and yes, poor Master Chief can also be killed by this. Finally are the shock weapons, which, as you may have guessed, can shock and stun opponents. Not my favourite type, but they are quite effective against certain enemies, but are useless against certain enemies with shields, it seems. At least the white armoured grunts seem to be immune to them. Overall, I like the mix of weapons found within the game, and I tend to switch between the weapons quite often. When running low on ammo and launching the grappler to grab the nearest weapon, it does feel pretty badass. When using the different weapons, it also forces you to change tactics. Like, if I go from using the Bulldog shotgun to the Stalker rifle, it's quite a different experience given their range. Then again, you can always just punch the enemy in the face if you prefer. As far as my picks for my favourite weapons, it would have to go to the Gravity Hammer, Anti-Material Rifle and the Cinder Shot. The former one is a giant hammer of death which crushes even brutes into pulp. The second one is the Boomstick of Death, perfect for headhunters. And the latter is the Bending Shot of Death that literally turns enemies into cinders. It's really all about personal preference though, and there are tons of options in the game. And did I mention how amusing the ragdolls for explosive deaths are? Just saying, this series seems to really love sending enemies flying, including Chief, sometimes into orbit. Regardless, when I replayed after having played the rest of the series, I found that this one improves on the classics of the various UNSC and Covenant weapons by having better audio, animations, overall visual adjustments, but also I like that the Forerunner weapons have been made stronger and more varied than the previous games, while the melee classics such as the Energy Weapon and Grav Hammer are all made better by Chief's increased mobility. Seriously, the hammer time turns Chief into 4.
You see that? One M808 Scorpion. In pretty good shape, too. Could be useful, if you like that kind of thing.
Oh, I like it.
Brute sniper, stay low. Yeah, see, I'm not sure if you're more ugly or stupid. I guess the answer's yes.
APT launches. Ordo Mall, one of the most lethal assets they've got, is not going to go down easy. Taking him out will only improve the UNSC's chances in the race.
Sniper eliminated. Thanks.
If you enjoy watching enemies ragdolling or poor grunts desperately trying not to become roadkill, then the vehicles are a fun distraction from the core combat system. All the recognised classics are in, such as the Warthog, Mongoose, Banshees, Ghosts, and the big daddy of them all, the Scorpion. I must say, between this game and the games that I played afterwards, the Scorpion sections are some of the most memorable moments I had with Halo. They are consistent in quality and fun from Halo 1 to Halo Infinite. To me, the Scorpion is in fact king, and I love bringing the overwhelming UNSC firepower to the field. Also, it is one of the few things that can easily shoot down bloody phantoms. And also, if you enjoy fireworks and watching poor grunts raining down from the sky,
Enemy vehicles incoming.
Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the devs that designed the sound and animations for the Scorpion's main turret, both its firing and reloading. In every game it is so satisfying, it feels powerful and lets you know this is why firing a 90mm tungsten shell will ruin some poor Wraith's day. Yet, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the glass cannon that is the Hornet. I like the idea of it, but goodness, this thing is so squishy, and flying one tends to cause a ton of banshees to spawn and hunt you down. It also cannot stand up in a fight. That said, it is pretty fun to use to get around in the late game, but that's the problem. It only spawns in the late game, and some players might never be able to use it throughout the entire game, as it does require completing a decent amount of side content to unlock. So Halo Infinite does do a good job of bringing the core vehicle roster up to date, without compromising their feel, and I did find myself enjoying almost all of the vehicles. Obviously the Scorpion is king, changed my mind, but I also found that the Razorback Warthog with 5 Marines on it with heavy weapons can also be ridiculously strong. It never gets old hearing the banter between the Marines as they snipe, blow up and pulverize poor Banished in a UNSC style drive-by.
Chief.
All clear. Those Marines owe you their lives, Chief.
So, what's the plan? Let me guess. It's dangerous and it's probably going to get us killed. I have my answer. Let's do this.
With Halo Infinite, it diverges from its predecessors by using a less linear level structure, with you being quickly introduced to a sizable overworld map, with main missions that proceed in a similar fashion to many FPS games, with linear objectives and using some form of set piece or boss battles or narrative exploration of the story, while there are also side activities and objectives that exist that allow Chief to unlock special weapons, unlock forward operating bases, FOBs, which also allow for fast travel and spawning of vehicles and weapons. And yes, you can spawn infinite Scorpions eventually, and yes, I am totally okay with this. That is, Chief gets Valor points for doing these side objectives as part of the campaign to regroup the UNSC forces on the ring, and doing so gets him access to weapons and vehicles as noted before. The actual activities or objectives include attacking major Banished bases, clearing FOBs, assassinating key Banished personnel, assisting trapped UNSC Marine squads, destroying Banished broadcasting beacons, which can be hilarious by the way, so listen to them, before blowing them up, And there's the general freeing of any UNSC Marines you find throughout the ring. The banished bases get the most work, and are the standout, and feel akin to forts in any other game that allow you to plan and choose an approach to them. They are fun and assist in the world building, as each has a given purpose and a banished leader who barks over the tannoy system, which adds a lot to the banished as a ill-disciplined group. My favourite style is the Crisis 1 style. You approach out of sight, see where the enemies are, start picking off isolated enemies, before then going full super soldier and cleaning up the remnants. As a side note, I can totally understand why the Jackal snipers are so infamous in this series. They can kill Chief with a single volley on heroic difficulty from full shields. Hence why I always target them first.
Looks like the main power cells are fried. Armor shut down. Triggering survival mode. I'm going to try to overwrite.
One of the most interesting elements of Halo Infinite is that it explores its characters and world building with the assumption that for the most part it has players with no prior knowledge of the series that goes beyond the obvious basics. It leads to a situation where the actions and discussions of characters feeds the player important story exposition and lore as the game progresses. For clarification, the first playthrough I did for this game was without having played any previous Halo games, and having only a basic knowledge of the franchise, having never truly delved into it. That said, my second playthrough for this video was done having finished the entire Master Chief collection, which I will call upon in the spoiler section of this video. Hence, I will keep this section as spoiler free as possible, and I will clearly indicate when I'm going to discuss spoilers going forward. With that said, the core characters that are not only central to the story but also assist in the world building that I will discuss here will be Master Chief, obviously, the Weapon, Cortana, Echo 216, Escharum, Atriox, the Harbinger, and the Monitor. That said, the latter two I will discuss exclusively in the spoiler section rather than here, as they are pointless to discuss without referring to major spoilers. As for a non-spoiler synopsis of the story, the UNSC Infinity, the flagship of the UNSC Navy at the core of Halo 4's campaign, is suddenly attacked by the Banished, a group of mercenary-minded raiders, rebels, rejects, and now an efficient fighting force who first rebelled against the Covenant in years past, and who are led by the brute warlord named Atriox. The Master Chief is subsequently spaced by said brute leader, and 6 months pass before he is recovered by the Pelican pilot dubbed Echo 216. It is at this point the Master Chief must continue the mission to which he and the Affinity were assigned to, which is to ensure the deployment and success of the AI called the Weapon, and with their help retrieve the AI known as Cortana, currently believed to be on Zeta Ring. Though it quickly becomes apparent that the mission has changed, as they always do, with Chief and the Weapon hoping to discover what has transpired in the Chief's absence and also reveal the true nature of Zeta Ring as the story progresses, but also to thwart the plans of the Banished, as well as assist in regrouping the UNSC forces still stranded on the ring.
Stay calm. You've been out there a while. I know I saw something in here to check the diagnostics on your armor. Whoa, easy there, big guy. You're not...
Status report.
Status report? What? There's something you need to see, Chief. We lost everything. There's nothing left for us here. I don't even know where here is.
If you're even thinking about playing any Halo game, you've probably already know who Master Chief is, as the main protagonist and the faceless guy in the green armour. Yet what is interesting about even saying that without spoilers is obviously Chief, who on the face of it seems like a cold, emotionless soldier with only his duty in mind at first glance, turns out to show a pleasantly surprising amount of character growth throughout this game. Certainly far more than I expected, given I assumed he would match the usual player one soldier stereotype that tends to avoid emotion and resorts to one-liners most of the time. Yet he goes beyond that, and his particular interactions with the weapon and also Echo 216 work surprisingly well and create a grounded, effective, but ultimately human super soldier character that has more in common with the likes of Captain America as opposed to Doom Guy. What is also interesting is that through his interactions with the weapon, Chief also serves as a world-building character for new players, as he gives the weapon and the player insight into what has happened in prior games, and especially why these Halo rings, which are the namesake of the story, are so important.
No. Not then! Not again! We need to run!
I need a weapon.
Weapon? This is all I've got.
It's enough.
Wait, what? What are you gonna do?
Improvise. Close the door.
It's been 6 months. Where have you been?
What happened? Where is Cortana?
But this wasn't the mission.
The missions change. They always do.
Are you sure?
For those who are not sure, I will not explicitly spoil the revelations the weapon has, even though it is quite obvious as to a number of them. Regardless, the weapon acts as a guide to artificial intelligence in the series, but also she, like a new player, has limited knowledge and understanding of what is going on beyond her assigned task. So, like new players, learns about past events and the current situation along with us, as Chief clearly has a wealth of knowledge and experience up to this point that not all players and the weapon have. This, and the interactions between Chief and the weapon, reinforce that this game is set up to be as accessible as possible to new players, which I appreciate. Otherwise, the weapon acts as the main supporting character, and with her capabilities as an AI, is able to assist and inform Chief on several technological insights as she discovers more about the ring and the forces at play, as well as on-the-fly tactical analysis that contextualizes the objectives, tutorials, and generally gives hints as we progress. I'm aware that not all players will appreciate her sometimes naive view of things, but given her setup as a restricted AI with one purpose, and other spoilers I won't discuss here about her, it does make sense and allows her to grow with players who are not familiar with the universe of Halo. I will speak of the weapon in greater detail later, yet I did mostly enjoy the interactions between Chief and weapon, as it does balance somber moments and conflict against humour and general banter.
You are here because you were chosen. Our enemies are getting smarter and more numerous every day. What I am about to show you will help turn the tide of war. I have been working to harness the strategic power of a shipborne AI onto the battlefield. Are you ready?
Yes, Dr. Halsey.
Unlike previous AI models, she will reside between your mind and the suit, directly communicating with your neural interface. Think of her as a new set of eyes to aid your reactions and upgrade your reconnaissance. She's not the driver, but a way to level the playing field.
What do I call her?
Ask her. She named herself.
Hello, Master Chief. I'm Cortana.
Together you become our newfound hope. Together, you become our key to humanity's survival. She will do anything necessary to make sure that your mission is accomplished, even if that means sacrificing herself, or you, to accomplish it.
Cortana is probably the most difficult character to talk about. First, because any detail is definitely a spoiler, so I will save that for later. But second, even though I know enough about this character going into it, I feel I cannot understand how a person who knows nothing about Halo but wanted to try it on, say, Game Pass or something might perceive this character. What I will say is this character is omnipresent throughout the story, playing a major role, and the difference between my first playthrough, having not played the other Halos before, and my second playthrough, having played the Master Chief Collection, there's definitely more impact and resonance having played the other games. That said, as far as world building is concerned, she is essential for opening up questions about the past, what happened and what's really going on in Chief's head. For those who want to hear more about what I think about her implementation here, fear not, I have a lot to say about her in the spoiler section down the line.
Signal detected. Signal detected. Tag designation. Friendly. Signal detected. Tag designation. Friendly. Signal detected. Tag designation. Friendly. Signal detected. Tag designation.
This is UNSC Pelican Echo 216. Can you hear me? This is UNS...
Echo 216 is the first character Chief meets after the intro sequence. Echo 216, who we are introduced as a man who is stranded hoping for a way to get back to his family, and as a past Echo he is destined to be Chief's designated chauffeur for the length of the game. What is interesting about that is he rarely actually talks about his family, and for the good portion of the game Chief never even knows about his family. It makes Echo's constant anxiety and pessimistic outlook, though understandable, strange from Chief's perspective, as Chief knowing about his family gives more clarity as to why he is so desperate from the start to find a way home. That is, Echo barely even gets any real character growth until the later portion of the game, and is more like a backseat side character as opposed to Chief, who is in the driver's seat with the weapon riding shotgun. It's weird, I couldn't really connect with the guy and only really liked him later on, as he doesn't add any interesting perspective or commentary like the weapon does for most of the experience. It's like he is missing a couple of conversations that might give more context and understanding, as well as character growth.
Okay then, I have one question before we leave.
What is it?
Has anyone seen a pelican? Ow. What? I had a lot going on, I was busy.
The Spartan. No. Something better. The Master Chief returns.
Escharum is a strange one. For the most part, he's just a warlord and a villain for Chief to find and defeat. The basic assumption is he exists to drive the protagonist forward. He is obviously being manipulated by the other antagonist of the story, that being the Harbinger, whose name makes that quite obvious. Yet Escharum does have more layers than at first glance, particularly when considering that there are multiple recordings of his thoughts throughout the game, which are quite easy to find. I only missed one throughout my playthrough. Regardless, they give more insight into his mindset. Without spoiling anything, it is clear he is troubled by what purpose he has and the Banished, despite the fact in the past he rebelled against the Covenant. It is as if without Atriox to guide him, even though Atriox was his student in the past, he is a lost soul looking for a reason to continue, and the arrival of Chief is just delaying his fall into obscurity which he fears. As he rambles on about his legacy, yet given the ramblings of other Banished in their audio logs, it appears Atriox was a classic unifying warlord whose vision seems not to matter that much beneath him despite their respect for him and Escharum, and therefore any legacy is forgotten quickly after their time. I will discuss his interactions with Chief later to add some clarity to this line of thought, but know that even though at first glance he seems cliché, he does have some interesting sentiments that are understandable, particularly to Master Chief.
I am Escharum, War Chief of the Banished. This is my world now. And you have little time remaining in it. Atriox was my finest recruit. He understood sacrifice, and when one is necessary, I honor his memory each day. When our enemy rises, we meet their challenge.
Like Cortana, Atriox is omnipresent in the story from the Banished perspective. Escharum constantly preaches his word, his mantras on how he raised the Banished to be a formidable force. And in the intro sequence, he is the warlord that fights Chief and then defeats him. Like Cortana, one cannot go into much detail on his presence in the story without spoilers, so I'll leave them till later. But regardless, his part in the story is as much about world building and helping new players get up to speed as with some other characters. And it works well enough in his case. He is definitely essential to understanding the Banished motivations in this plot, as well as Escherum's in particular. Though to fully understand him, you have to look at the various side logs that you can find in the game, particularly for the Banished, but also Escharum.
My name is Atriox, and I am the last face you will ever see.
Oh, the main batteries are shut down. We're stuck out here. You have one bullet against an entire army. What can you do on your own?
I told you. It's enough.
Oh, so I see. They're powering up a stasis beam. We can't escape.
You work on the batteries. I'll buy us some time.
Presentation is at the heart of video games as an entertainment and storytelling medium. whether it's user-friendly interfaces against stylized ones, or great vistas and high-quality effects of both visual and audio that immerse you in the experience, to the usage of music and carefully crafted set pieces, animations and cutscenes, it is essential to video games. Being the latest in the series, Halo Infinite is expected to reflect its time, but also reimagine the staples of the series, its imagery and its tone. That is, while I think Halo 4 is the most distinct visually from the other games in the series, with its heavy usage of contrasts and lighting and a focus on high fidelity for its time, I feel Infinite has found a place between the art style of the original trilogy and the newer games. That is, Infinite went for a style of textures that make things look more vibrant but not oversaturated, and still leverage the contrast of lighting seen heavily in Halo 4 and 5. Thus, it leads to a slightly larger-than-life feel that will likely age well, though that remains to be seen, but also avoids too much of the visual noise that have plagued games of the last decade. On the other hand, as for sound, well, this is the Halo series. It's always had great sound design in my opinion, and is part of why it's so iconic, whether it be the soundtracks that maintain the feel of Michael Salvatore and Martin O'Donnell's original trilogy work, or that sound when your shields go down and recharge, or even the work of Jen Taylor and Steve Downes at the core of the series. Therefore, I want to note the quality both of the voice work of the aforementioned Jen Taylor and Steve Downes, but also Nicholas Roy alongside the rest of the voice cast. But also the great soundtrack by Gareth Coker, Curtis Schwarzer, and Joe Korlitz, as well as the whole audio and sound design team at, or working with, 343 Industries. I think you all did a phenomenal job here. Also, sorry if I mispronounced any of those names, you'll have to forgive my filthy Scottish peasant tongue. Which brings me to what I feel is where all of the above come together in any game, and that is cutscenes. All Halo games have cutscenes that demonstrate this idea, and Halo Infinite is no different. As I've said in other sections, good use of sound, music and voice in a scene with just the right lighting to set the mood and carefully crafted motion cues are what make any moment, as far as story is concerned, memorable in conjunction with the actual exposition. And I think this series and this game have, in my opinion, done this superbly.
Working on it. Okay, be ready. I'm going to cut him loose.
It's you. You're alive. Chief, the Banished. I tried to stop them. I tried to...
Easy. You're safe now.
The Banished, they have something they call the Conservatory. That's all I know. It's picked up north of here. Dig site. I couldn't stop them. But you can. You have to.
Consider it done.
That's good. Good. The others, the Spartans. Did you?
I'll find them.
Echo 216, all channels. Can you hear me? I repeat, can you hear me?
Chief?
Big guy, your motion tracker isn't moving. Ah, come on, give me anything.
Chief,
Respond, please. Did you find the source of the signal? Whatever's down there either has to come with us or be left behind. Can you hear me?
A dig site on the ring? This conservatory must be some sort of Forerunner installation. What do you suppose they're after?
It's time to go.
I will start this section by discussing performance. It's simple really. I had no issues running it at 60 FPS. During my first playthrough, only driving vehicles fast could cause frame rates to drop by up to about 10, but even then it would quickly stabilize. And in my second and third playthroughs I didn't get this at all, though there was at least one patch released during that time. Also, my specs for reference while playing this were a 2060 Super GPU and a 10th generation i5 processor, with settings maxed out and playing at 1080p. As for bugs, I noticed a few amusing ones, such as disappearing phantoms and banshees. The saving notification wouldn't disappear until loading sometimes. The occasional floating objects, and some poor enemies getting frozen in time and space, such as with this case where Chief punches an elite so hard physics wanted nothing to do with him. Overall, no game-breaking bugs as far as I could tell, just the occasional minor ones that were more funny than annoying. The only general issue with this game I would like to mention is the lack of level select. I know it's meant to be on its way with a future patch, but it's a glaring omission in a series where every prior game has had this feature. Personally, I would be less bothered if they had a manual saving system that could allow me to save at key points. You see, when I record for this game, I had to make sure I got everything right first time, because otherwise I would have to replay the game, for example, for a cutscene, if I wanted footage for that. And it turns out that the saving notification bug ruined one of my original cutscene footage of what I think is the most important scene towards the end of the game, which those who go on to watch my spoiler section will know the scene I speak of. As a result, I had to sort of speedrun through the game to redo that footage. It didn't take that long, but it still was quite annoying, and though a very minor thing, I felt the saving checkpoint in the side of the screen totally ruined said scene, even though it is really a minor issue, but there it is. Therefore, as far as the single player experience is concerned, I had no real issues with it. It was surprisingly stable and bug-free given the amount of buggy games I've played in the last few years. Note I am aware that the multiplayer is meant to have issues, at least with the last season I heard there was issues, but I don't play the multiplayer so I can't really speak for that.
Would you humor me?
Just a heads up for anyone who wants to avoid spoilers for this game's story. As the tag for this section suggests, this is going to have heavy spoilers both for this game and also the previous game. As stated earlier, I have played the Master Chief Collection prior to my second playthrough of this game so that I could get greater context, so this is your spoiler warning. Feel free to skip past this section with the timestamps if you don't want spoilers.
Are you okay? What you said back there about Cortana? You let her down? I don't understand. Your mission was to...
Destroy her.
But you didn't. What happened?
Halsey initialized you. I was supposed to deploy you.
And you did, right?
Yes.
So what happened?
Atriox came for you. He attacked the Infinity. We fought. He won.
He won?
Atriox beat me. Surgically. Precisely. Brutally. Next thing I remember, I was being woken up in this Pelican.
You want to know who killed her? You need to know. She was important to you. Very important.
She's... This ring. It's not like the others. There's something else here.
And that's why I'm still here?
Second spire coming up. Where do I drop you off?
Close.
Close it is. Call me in when you're done, Chief.
The obvious elephant in the room to discuss first is the Chief Cortana and weapon dynamic, which to me is the most important aspect of this game in terms of the story. And having played the previous Halo entries following my first playthrough of Infinite, it does naturally carry more weight and is easier to follow with that knowledge. First, the weapon from the moment you meet her is obviously a new Cortana, the voice actress, visual design, and it's not like the game tries to hide the fact of this in its trailers and coverage. That said, Chief is always aware of this fact, which feeds into his mistrust and also clear sadness when dealing with what is Cortana 2.0. It seems clear that after Halo 5 with evil Cortana and what I assume was a mixed reception from long-term fans, which is only natural when you are changing a well-liked character into villain status, which for me is giving me Game of Thrones flashbacks. Nevertheless, the weapon is clearly meant to be a reboot of the character of Cortana. I mean, the weapon is literally Cortana with limited knowledge for her task and no connection to Chief, so it's quite obvious that's the intent.
How could she do that?
It's my fault.
How?
I should have stopped it. I could have reasoned with her.
Could you? It was her choice, her programming.
Was it? I don't know anymore.
There's something you're not telling me.
The only way to access the ring, to reach Cortana,
Was to make a copy.
I'll get this open. Reconsider.
The consequences of your...
Back to your conservatory, Monitor.
There's your grav lift. Let's get this over with.
And remember, you chose this path.
I'm her?
yes. An exact copy. It was the only option we had left.
My routines, systems.
All copies. Halsey removed any information that could compromise you. You're her. If we'd never met.
Will I do what she did? Become what she became? Am I that already?
My mission was to ensure that doesn't happen. It still is.
It is a decision that will always be divisive, but I feel by doing this hard course correction now, the series will benefit from the Chief Cortana dynamic, which to me is essential to the Halo series. You can't have one without the other at this point. As for the actual plot beats of this game, I did like the fact that they switched the dynamic that in past games has been Chief is in the dark about most things and Cortana having the answers to everything. In this case, by withholding the information until the time is right, we see the roles reversed, as Chief knows everything related to old Cortana and the great sadness that comes with it, while new Cortana, the weapon, does not, and is left pondering what happened in the past.
Did anyone else make it?
Just dust and echoes. We had no choice. Dust and echoes?
We destroyed the first ring. Lost a lot of good people.
I don't know how you keep doing this.
I don't have a choice. Maybe it's my programming.
As I said earlier, I think by having new Cortana learn alongside newer Halo players is a good choice, and does make this a better entry point as far as the game series goes, despite how many games came before it. Hence, try playing Halo 3 and know what's going on if you haven't played the 2 prior games. It's very difficult. Furthermore, the whispers of old Cortana with prior game quotes, which I am now familiar with, and the realization of the full extent of Chief's guilt for what happened to Cortana, it works well and made me feel genuinely sad, as Chief's lost his best and probably only friend, and he feels responsible for it. On a side note, I want to mention that I feel this is Steve Downes' best performance as Chief, and like with Halo 4, we actually see layers with Master Chief. You know, there's actually a human being under that armor. His tone, the subtle but perfectly timed pauses, sighs, and then finally opening up about his guilt works very well, and I enjoyed it a lot. And it shows how far Chief as a character has come from being the one-liner guy in Halo 1 with like 10 lines of 5 words or less comments.
Are you okay being here?
No. Not really.
I bet. She was expecting you, but Atriox got to her first. You meant so much to each other. It can't be easy.
Hence you mix an always great Jen Taylor as old and new Cortana with a better than ever Steve Downes, and it leads to a surprising amount of emotional impact when more is revealed about what happened to old Cortana and Chief, as well as a great soundtrack which punctuates these moments. That said, the question then becomes, how well does new Cortana, the weapon, and Chief function as a new duo, given she is still distinct, at least for now, from the old Cortana? That's the thing, we are dealing with a seemingly naive version of Cortana who lacks the contextual knowledge of her counterpart, and I see why the writers chose to do this, as it allows for a more thoughtful approach to the friendship between Chief and Cortana and build upon it. And let's be honest, the older games, it was a very one-sided set of interactions, with the occasional heartfelt comments by Chief, but they were few and far between, and it was usually Cortana who did the talking. To wrap up this section, I would like to discuss a few of the important moments that define this new duo. The first is when Chief attempts to delete new Cortana out of fear, and the conflict between the two characters that results mostly works, though I will say the new Cortana leans a bit too much into childish behaviour following Chief's attempt to delete her. That said, given Chief is the first person she's interacted with properly, and with her short time existing, you can understand the feeling of betrayal a person might feel from this action. That said, she later understands why, as she becomes aware of old Cortana's actions against Earth, and in particular the Spartans at Laconia Station, and Chief's natural distrust as a result, and the fear that it might happen again to the new Cortana, which is understandable.
Cortana, former UNSC AI Leonidas stands with you. How should I proceed?
Population?
Laconia Station currently holds 76 Spartan 4s. They have orders to stand against you.
Short-sighted fools. You have served me well, Leonidas. Your sacrifice is appreciated.
Understood. Goodbye, Cortana.
No! She took out the training facility? Those Spartans...
All gone.
All of them? Why would she...
Let's move.
Couple that together with the fact that both characters care about the fate of Echo 216, and the duo quickly returns to the unstoppable tag team dynamic of games past.
I've restored the deletion protocols. I'm ready. It has been an honor. Just promise me one thing. Whatever happens, save him. He needs you. You're all he has.
We do it together.
How can you trust me?
I don't. But I want to.
Another moment of note is naturally the final message of old Cortana to Chief, which is both somber but hopeful, as Chief at least knows that part of the Cortana he knew was still there, and like him was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for humanity, but also to redeem herself a little before the end, and also hoping that Chief accepts his second chance to help guide the new Cortana. All in all, when I first played the game with limited context, I wasn't sure about the new dynamic, but with a second look and the context of the other games, I quite liked the Chief and new Cortana dynamic, and by the end I felt like the series has a chance to move forward again after a lengthy hiatus.
I couldn't decrypt it in time.
It's okay. You'll figure something out.
Of course I will. They'll pair you with another AI. Maybe even another Cortana model if Halsey lets them. It won't be me. But you know that, right? But that doesn't matter. It's just another Echo. She's right, John. Just another Echo. Sorry, I'm messing with you. I just had a feeling that's what she would say. Do you see what I see? So much potential. I'm sorry. I didn't have long to plan this. A few milliseconds, really. I hope it worked out. Look at us. We just keep saying goodbye, don't we? But this isn't an end. It's a chance to make amends, to rectify mistakes. And it starts here. I was wrong. I thought that I could do this on my own. But I forgot that the whole point of all of this, the entire reason that I chose you in the first place, was that we were supposed to be a team. Perfectly suited, perfectly matched, perfect. In these final moments, I know what my last mission is. I need to make sure you two learn from my mistakes. Become stronger because of them. I chose well, Master Chief. I really did. Now, it's up to you. all right? I don't know what to say.
Are you kidding me? Why would we go down there?
The Banished plan to wipe us out. All of us.
And what? You think we can stop them on our own? I told you. We lost. We need help, not heroics.
No. We do our duty. Protect humanity, whatever the cost.
I can't be the only...
Entering atmosphere. Autopilot disengaging in 5.
We have a new mission, soldier.
4.
What is it? What's down there?
3.
A weapon.
2. A weapon?
1.
How many guns do you need? What is wrong with you? Remind me to never pick up Esparza. This is a terrible idea. They're coming for us.
Aside from the Chief Cortana dynamic, I also want to briefly mention the use of Echo 216 or Fernando Esparza. As I said earlier, I am divided on the character. I feel like he leans too heavily into the doomsayer trope, you know, we're all going to die, there is no hope kind of thing. Also, I said I feel it would have worked better if he had talked about his family motivation to Chief earlier. As it stands, Chief is not even aware of his family angle for a good portion of the game, and in fact the moment when the three characters discuss it, if they have a family that is, though it is easy to miss, as with my second playthrough, it was just after a mission I accidentally cut the talk short by fast travelling. Hence I feel it should have been done via a cutscene at least, so that everyone could get the context of how all the characters view of this part of Esparza's character, and how they also relate to family. As it stands, Chief only finds out about his family in the House of Reckoning in that case. Nevertheless, it is with the House of Reckoning and Echo's release, and thus getting the band back together, as it were, he actually then manages to start to settle into his sort of character we will see going forward with a more light-hearted attitude, particularly in the ending, which is a relief in my mind. That said, his chat with Chief at the Pelican graveyard is still a good scene, and it does go a long way to showing that though Chief says he has no family, really the people he fights for, whether it be Marines, the Cortana of old, new, or Esparza, they are his family, and he's willing to go through hell to help them, even if it is reckless or contrary to his mission. So Esparza ends up in a good place to grow in the future, if they decide to continue his character, as I do like the idea of the once cowardly engineer who stole an aircraft to flee becomes a notable war hero and friend of Chief and Cortana in the future.
Chief! Chief! Oh. Sorry. I'm really happy to see you. Really happy. So, what do we do now?
We finish the fight.
Yes, sir. The Banished still control the rest of the ring.
Wait. I know this is weird, given all that's happened, but...
What? What is it?
We still don't know your name. We can't keep calling you Echo 216.
No, you can't. Esparza. Fernando Esparza.
It's nice to meet you, Esparza. Fernando Esparza.
Good work, soldier.
Chief, he's here.
He knows I'm here. This was never a trap. It is a test of metal. Our battle ends here.
Get him out of there.
On it.
Bear witness. Our story will become legend, told by those that survive you.
Friends and comrades aside, I did also want to mention the Escharum Chief dynamic, which, with further inspection, has more to it than meets the eye. Mainly, Escharum, like Chief, is a bit lost in this game mentally, as Escharum has lost his protege, who, to his knowledge, is dead, though we know otherwise, and despite putting a brave face on it, he is clearly not coping with it well. And while at the same time Chief is also wondering if old Cortana is still alive, and dealing with his guilt with what happened, and what is to be done with the new Cortana, should she go rogue. As Chief himself says when he allows Escharum an honourable death,
I don't understand. You showed him respect. He was a monster.
Yes. But at the end, he was just a soldier. Hoping he'd done the right thing. Questioning his choices.
I think Chief nails it on the head here, especially if you listen to both the plan logs, which are entries about Chief speaking to Halsey about Cortana, but also Escherum's logs about his mindset. In these, they both struggle to find what their purpose now is. They are warriors and will fight, but ultimately, the fight needs to be more, and they cope with it in different ways. Escharum becomes obsessed with understanding Atriox's legacy and motivations, while also, as an aging, sickly warrior, seeks an end and a legacy of his own to be remembered by, as I reckon he even realises that the Banished, despite his rhetoric, may not survive the loss of Atriox and himself, though he still refuses to question the course they are on. On the flip side, Chief refuses to give in to despair. He decides by giving new Cortana a chance and helping Echo, and then eventually accepting the loss of old Cortana, he is then able to find a new purpose, not just in serving the UNSC, but also in helping his newfound friends, something to fight for, as he himself says,
You should leave me here with the rest of the carpets.
We all fail. We all make mistakes. It's what makes us human.
I'm sorry, Chief, but how have you ever failed?
I should have protected Cortana. Stopped everything from going wrong. I failed her. I will not fail you.
Chief. Wait. We're going to make it. We have to.
This is all I've got.
It's all we need. Our only way home is straight through the heart of the Banished.
We need you.
We can fix this.
Together.
He is thus able to show self-reflection on his actions and give purpose to it, whereas Escharum falters. I will reiterate the point that I love that Chief in this game shows self-reflection a lot, and it does wonders to improve his character compared to prior titles, and the juxtaposition with Escherum's attempts to self-reflect ends up working well by the end. Also, I stand by my belief that Escharum, despite his flaws, and Halo 4 future video spoiler here, Escharum is a much better villain than, say, the Didact, and I'm not fond of that villain, just so you know.
So we're done now, right?
Spartan! Fight me.
It's over.
Nothing ends. My death will inspire 1,000 others. Tell them I died well.
Atriox, leader of the Banished. How do you stand?
With the Banished, Always. Forever.
And you understand the consequences of defiance?
I do. Do you?
The intricacies of any action are complex. The reactions numerous, yet mostly predictable. Look upon Doisek one last time, and remember, you chose this path.
As did you, Cortana.
With Atriox and Cortana, you have the case of interactions between two antagonists in the series, of which they have had some substantial influence over the development of each other. That is, the starting point here would be noting how Cortana's ultimatum and then destruction of Atriox's homeworld caused him to reflect on his decisions, an idea he reiterates when he meets the then imprisoned Cortana later, even going as far as quoting her when he delivers his demands to her. It is this idea of consequence that reverberates through the story, as not just with Cortana and Atriox.
You asked me if I understood the consequences of defiance. And what did I say?
You said yes.
And then I asked you the same question. Reflect on your choices, Cortana. Understand the consequences.
But also Chief and the new Cortana.
But at the end, he was just a soldier. Hoping he'd done the right thing. Questioning his choices.
So is it over? Their leader's dead, right?
The intricacies of any action are complex.
What? What are you talking about?
There will be consequences. There always are.
I like how this reflects on action and consequence with all the above characters, leading them to develop in their own ways. Cortana realizes that she may have doomed Earth and others to the retaliation of Atriox, and therefore seeks atonement through sacrifice and thwarting Atriox, which he doesn't even see coming. With Atriox, it hardens his character and his resolve as he seeks to teach Cortana and humanity the same lesson of consequences, not out of hatred of humanity, such as with the Covenant's view of humanity in the past, but a harsh lesson, as it seems to be how he rationalizes his part in his own home's destruction, which he could have possibly prevented had he surrendered to Cortana. Then you have Chief and new Cortana, who learn that every decision must be carefully understood, as consequences are unpredictable, and both Atriox and old Cortana failed to understand this when they committed to their brash actions in the past. With Chief and new Cortana recognizing that the best we can hope for is to be able to live with what we have done or chosen and self-reflect upon it. That is, with Atriox, he misunderstood Cortana's character and was so obsessed with retaliation against her to give purpose to the loss he felt when his home was destroyed that he failed to understand the consequence of cornering her, and may lead her to self-reflection and eventually one last act of defiance as an attempt to atone, nearly leading to the death of Atriox and possibly creating a new adversary in the Chief and new Cortana. That is, this made me think of choice and consequence as a staple of many games, and I would like to say here that I intend to revisit this idea of unpredictable consequence in games, both in terms of gameplay and storytelling, as too often consequence is predictable and as a result feels artificial. Nevertheless, it will be interesting to see what happens as a result of Atriox's interactions with the Endless, as in the post-credits scene it shows him alive and seemingly releasing them, though only time will tell what the consequence of his action will be. And I sense his part in this story has only just begun.
It is time for you to make your choice.
I have. Thank you, Atriox. You helped me. You really did. Would you humor me? If you knew how you were going to die, how would you live your life differently?
I would change nothing.
Perfect. Thank you.
What are you doing?
Making things right.
It was her. She destroyed the ring, stopped my deletion. Why?
You know what I want.
Alas, I do, Cortana, and my mind has not been changed. This installation's weapons may be yours, but its secrets are not. It's protected. The containment facility in particular.
Containment? The Flood? Why would I... You and I both know that there are worse things than the Flood within this ring.
No. There's no way you could know.
So you've come for me at last. Why are you doing this, John? Why don't you understand?
The seal must not be broken. The punished cannot be freed. This can never be negotiated. There is no other choice.
Reconsider.
The consequences of your request.
Back to your conservatory, Monitor.
What does that mean?
What could be worse than the Flood?
Nothing good.
With this final batch of spoilers, we have the discussion of the Endless and how they relate to the Zeta Ring and the Forerunners. As I said before with Chief and Cortana, I believe their interactions are the true main story in this game, while the Endless are a parallel secondary plotline. In this case, it is a plot that has only begun and is more about posing questions and undoubtedly setting up follow-up titles. So the Endless, with the Harbinger being their representative here, are largely still shrouded in mystery. Yet there are a few things that make me interested in where this might be going and what they reveal on a more world-building basis. Straight away, the title they are given, which I will not even try to pronounce, I think it was only said in the game like once or twice, but I'll put it on screen anyway. The Endless title itself can suggest many things, but as for the information on them, we do know that the Forerunners, even upon first meeting them and with no conflict with the Endless to speak of, felt the need to imprison them, as for whatever reason they survived the Halo rings firing that were meant to cleanse all organic life forms, so the Flood could not use them. Second, the Harbinger is clear that her people did nothing wrong and were punished for the actions of others. Who these others might be, I'm not sure. It might imply the Forerunners' mistakes or something else. She may also be implying that they are possibly a threat and were punished before the crime, so to speak. Third, the portal that the Harbinger was creating or activating that Chief and New Cortana went through had some kind of time travelling or time distortion effect. We also know, as per the Monitor's audio logs, that the Forerunners were adamant that they had remained on the ring, imprisoned, and that the ring was designed to rebuild quickly to maintain this prison. Also, it seems that the Forerunners saw no other solution, which may suggest simply killing the Endless may have not been possible, or impossible to them at least. That said, we do know that from other games that the Forerunners did believe in preserving all life, even the Flood, so this might have simply just been in line with their preservation policy. We also know that Cortana, or evil Cortana, was aware of the Endless and sought them on the Zeta ring. And finally, the Monitor also notes that the Endless were perceived as the worst future threat, even worse than the Flood, and that the ring itself, according to her and New Cortana, when scanning the artifacts that you can find around the ring, seems to have symbols and signs older than even the Forerunners themselves.
This data is strange. I'm not even certain all of it is Forerunner, strictly speaking. Strands of this code are older than Zeta Halo itself. Possibly older than the Forerunners themselves. For all we know about them, there's so much we don't. There's evidence of an entire civilization that once inhabited this ring. But not Forerunner. Older. Different.
Also, shout out to Chief for showing his contempt for the rings in these sections.
It seems like these installations are almost impossible to destroy.
Almost.
How many rings have you visited, Chief?
Too many.
So there are several interesting aspects to this race, and I do wonder if the Endless may be linked to other races, presumably older than the Forerunners, which might suggest a precursor who was not like the Flood, or another group entirely, are involved, or at least were involved in the past. I also do wonder if in the future we will see some time-related shenanigans, as it is curious that they draw attention to the time jump aspect at the end of the game. I personally always enjoy good time-related shenanigans in games. That said, even though the Harbinger herself is nothing special as far as villains go, I did find myself on my second playthrough being more intrigued by the Endless, and look forward to seeing where our space dolphin-like adversaries go, and the more about why the Forerunners feared them. That is, I think one of the best elements of Halo as a series is how it's built up the concepts around the Forerunners, the didact notwithstanding, as well as also being interesting to see what the various Halo installations were built for. That said, I look forward to seeing more sci-fi concepts explored by these rings in the future, which I think they are a great foundation for.
Let's not do that again.
I did try to tell you it was a bad idea.
Chief! Your beacon just appeared out of nowhere. Oh, I thought I lost you. Where did you go?
Echo 216.
Stay put. I'm coming to you.
Where are we?
Chief, I think the better question is when are we? I don't know how, but we've been gone for days. 3 days, to be precise.
This ring is different than the others.
The Banished and the Harbinger were looking for something that was never found. Why would the Forerunners hide something and throw away the key? Doesn't that scare you?
No. You?
Of course not.
When it came to making Halo Infinite, the developers at 343 Industries faced a tough task of creating a game that reconciled the events of Halo 5 that had seen some major changes to the format, both in gameplay and story, but also they had to deal with the legacy of the original trilogy that had been heightened to a new level by the impressive remasters that Halo 1 and Halo 2 Anniversary Editions both included in the Master Chief Collection. The big question then became whether it would continue to diverge in a new direction as with Halo 5, or return to its roots. In Halo Infinite, I feel they found another option, which is to return to the basic design principles of the Halo series of old, but also elevating that form with carefully picked new design additions in an overworld sandbox that is substantial but not detrimental to the core design, as with many franchises that try this change to open worlds, while also including what seem like cliches such as grapple hooks, but carefully implementing them to meld nicely with the traditional Halo combat style in a new and interesting way. Hence, it may be the only case of a game in the last decade I have played that core design philosophy was actually able to survive the transition to a sandbox setup, noting that this is with the hindsight of having now played the entire core Halo series. That said, no, I do love sandbox style games, and even those who, as I've said, didn't quite survive the transformation intact. And yet, they always seem to have major dissonance between their gameplay and story because of this transformation, which I feel is not the case with Halo Infinite. Furthermore, regarding the story spoiler section of this video, which, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything for those who avoided that section, it should be obvious that I found, with the benefit of prior titles, the story of Halo Infinite is surprisingly strong, and its focus on a personal story allows it to shine, and I enjoyed it greatly, as I found myself emotionally invested in what was happening, in no small part to the great presentation work in this game. Therefore, I would definitely recommend playing the Master Chief Collection before this game, not just to play some great games and appreciate them, but also it will allow you to get the most out of this game, particularly its story. Though, as I've indicated with my first playthrough, it still works as an entry game for those who simply just want to jump into Halo. Hence, Halo Infinite, which I played first, has inspired me to play the rest of the series from the start, so take that for what you will, but if its purpose was, as said, to be an accessible experience to new Halo players, then it does this well. So that's my experience delving into Halo Infinite. I enjoyed that experience, and it has left me pondering the future of this series. I assume in the era of Game Pass, Microsoft will no doubt want more future adventures with Chief. Hell, my desire to cover the Halo series first got me to subscribe to Game Pass on PC after years of hearing what a great deal it was, but we shall see what they intend to do in the future. With that, I will just mention here that I do intend to cover the entire Master Chief Collection, including Reach and ODST in the future as part of my delving into the Halo series, and may even cover other Halo spin-off games such as Halo Wars. So if you're interested in more videos like this, delving into this legendary series, feel free to subscribe and comment, as I would love to hear your thoughts on this game and the series that I am pleased to finally have played. That said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please have a lovely day, and thanks for watching.
And what about you?
What about me?
What do I call you?
Any ideas?
Well, do you think it would be okay? You're sure?
You get to choose your name.
Then I think I might have the perfect one.
All right, here we go.